I'm now joined by Debra Shushan. She's the Director of Policy and Government Relations at Americans for Peace now. So much to talk about, Debra. So,
Indeed.
Was this indictment really surprising?
No, it wasn't surprising at all. It was a very long time in coming. Months ago, we heard from Attorney General Mandelblit that he intended to indict the Prime Minister. At that point, the Prime Minister had the opportunity for a hearing with the Attorney General, which of course he conducted with his lawyers. And it was after that process that the Attorney General finally, months later, made this determination and now announcement that he is going to actually indict Netanyahu.
Netanyahu has had many troubles in the past with corruption allegations and charges, and it seems every time this man survives. How is that possible, and how popular is he still inside Israel?
It's a great question. So there's an interesting poll that was published by Channel 12 News in Israel that was just released. It was conducted before the announcement by the Attorney General. It says that only 30% of Israelis think that he should continue to sit as prime minister now that he has been indicted, whereas over 40% think, 46% I believe said that they believe he should step down entirely. 17% think that he should step back temporarily, at least, while this legal process goes on. So really, it's only a pretty small minority of Israelis who think that he should continue.
Now, if Israel does hold a third election this year,
which is likely,
what are the chances Netanyahu will run? What are the chances he could actually win? And is that legally okay in Israel to be an indicted prime minister?
So there are a lot of questions here, right? So one of the things that normally would happen before another election would be that the Likud party would hold a primary to determine who its leader would be, to determine the order of the list. Now, Netanyahu moved to try to prevent that primary from happening. Now that the indictment announcement has happened, I think it's much less likely that he'll succeed in that regard. And so there probably will be a new race for leadership. Gideon Sa'ar, one of his foremost competitors within the Likud party, has indicated that he will challenge Netanyahu. The word was that at least one other member of Likud is likely to enter that race, and others may very well join.
So what are his options? What are Netanyahu's options, and how much of a blow is this for him politically?
So in terms of his options, what he's most likely to do, what would certainly be wise for him to do in terms of his political survival, which is clearly his preeminent and if not only calculation, is to request immunity from prosecution while he's prime minister from the Knesset. Now, one thing that's going to serve him very well is that the committee within the Knesset that would normally hear that request and determine whether to grant it to him is not constituted because of the current temporary nature of the Israeli government, which, having not been able to had a coalition form after the last election, that committee doesn't currently exist. So as long as that committee doesn't exist, and there's a question of whether the Knesset would try to form that committee, his request would just would sit out there, and he could not be tried within that period. So that very much is within his interests. The legal process is likely to drag on here for years, which is something that we should, it's already been going on for years, right? The investigations have been going on for years. But keep in mind, so the last prime minister to have been investigated for corruption, this is Ehud Olmert. He was not indicted while he was prime minister because he elected to step down during that investigation process. He stepped down. In 2009, he was indicted when he was no longer prime minister. He went to jail in 2016. The legal process and the full appeals process took 7 years. If the same thing happens with Netanyahu, he will be 77 years old by the time he would go to jail, at which point he would actually likely benefit from considerations from the court that would lessen his sentence due to advanced age.
And you're smiling while you're saying all this. And very quickly, if there was going to be an election in Israel, what would be the date? Has that been finalized?
The date will be at some point in the spring. So likely March, April timeframe.
Of next year.
Sorry, of 2020, exactly.
Okay. Debra Shushan, thank you so much.